Hello there, we're here with tip number 4 on how to stop the fight in our families. But more importantly, how to stop the fight before it even starts, right?
Right. So before we get into that, just a reminder, if you stick around to the end, we've got a free gift for you. We've developed a number of resources that go far more into depth into parenting and how to run your household and how to bring greater joy and happiness to your family. We want to share those with you. We've got an entire parenting system for you that's free, no cost. So stick around to the end. We'll give you details on how you get hold of that. Okay. Now, also at the end of this, we have a surprise ending for you. Meaning, we're going to share with you some ideas that'll help you find, techniques for stopping fighting and yelling and contention in the house before it happens. But there's also a very powerful way to do this that you might not have thought of. And so we're going to share an idea with you at the end that I think will really surprise you. You'll really enjoy. So stick around for that.
All right, so we have a story for you today. It's about a little boy named Tommy.
Tommy and the Beans.
Tommy and the Beans. He came to stay at our house for a few days. 6, 7 years old. How old was
he was about 7. He was about 7.
And his mom was having a few struggles with him and things like that. And we were getting close to dinner time. And I pulled him aside and said, "Okay, Tommy, one of the rules of our house is we eat. And we all eat the same food. We don't complain about it. We don't whine. We don't fuss about the meal. It's there. Whatever food is there, that's what we eat, and we happily eat it.
Right. Whatever you're served is what you get, basically.
That's right.
And he seemed to understand.
I thought he understood.
Yeah, but I knew that. I just knew that in his world that he was mostly served junk food, and so it was almost guaranteed that whatever we put on the table, he was not going to be overly excited about.
Yeah, that's true. So I think it was Mexican dinner that night, and beans. So we sit up to eat. We start serving out the food to everyone. I give him some rice, and he says, "Oh, I hate rice. This looks awful. This looks yuck. I don't want to eat this. Give me something
the best
else."
part about that was when I'm looking. As he's saying this, I'm looking around at our children, right? Because our children know what the rule is.
That's right.
And he starts in about how he hates rice and this and that. Don't you have anything else? And blah blah. And I look over at Esther, and she has this look on her face, and she would have been about 10 or 11 at the time, and she's got this look on her face like, "Oh no, this is this is not going to go
down this road.
Should not go down this road." So
then we proceed, and I serve him up here's some beans for you, to go with his rice. And
now,
then
just to be clear, before we tell the rest of the story, we did give him fair warning because he's a newbie, right? So it's like, okay, Tommy, remember, we don't complain about the food.
That's
so understand you probably don't like rice. You maybe have never even tasted this kind of rice, but we don't complain about the food. Just fair warning.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So then the beans came.
So here come the beans, and he just blew up. He said, "I hate beans. I'm not eating this. I'm so sick of trying to eat your food and all this." And so immediately, Joshua stands up.
No warning.
No warning.
This is important. No warning.
No warning. Goes, picks him up, takes him into the couch, sets him on the couch. Says, "You can sit here until we're done eating or until you apologize and want to come and eat with us."
Yeah. Now, I knew something about Tommy. He was a very, very social child. He loved being around people. He loved having attention. And so I had already thought through, okay, what's going to happen when he decides that he's not going to, eat any of this food. So that was my response.
So he was prepared, ready.
I immediately grabbed him, little shock factor, picked him up, not roughly, but just picked him up, set him down on the couch, said, "Okay, you get to sit out here all by yourself, not eat any dinner, and, just enjoy yourself." So I went back into the kitchen.
We all just continue eating like nothing had happened.
Right. A few minutes later, we hear Tommy in there, crying, whimpering and crying. And so I went back in there and knelt down in front of him like, "All right, Tommy, here's the deal. If you will apologize for fussing and whining about what food you're being served and come in and happily eat your dinner, then we'll just pretend like nothing ever happened and go on with our dinner." And he kind of, sniffled, dried his eyes and said, "Okay," and came walking back in, sat down and tentatively took a little bite of the beans, and then he was like, "I love beans.
These are great." Just proceeded to finish eating his dinner.
He was all excited. Yeah. Now
he finally had realized that we were serious about what we were saying. Yeah. This wasn't a threat. There's an exact consequence for what you're doing.
Right. So. Now this is a principle. It's not necessarily a technique because it's applicable in so many different categories, but this is definitely a principle, and we call this principle non-negotiables.
Mm-hmm.
And non-negotiables is one of the most powerful things you can do inside of your home in order to stop the fighting and the yelling and the issues before they ever arise, okay? So how does this non-negotiable thing work? Well, if you think back to the story that we just talked about, Tommy and the beans, you'll see that there's a pattern in a number of things. Do you want to tell them about the first one?
Yeah. The first one is we need to have clear rules, and our children need to know that. For example, one of the rules in our home is you don't talk back to mom.
Right, yeah. Let me get to that in just a second. Let's tell them the other three rules because you can see the whole example here. Mm-hmm. So first one is you have to have clear rules. So remember we sat down with Tommy. Margie sat down with Tommy and first said, okay, here's the deal. You're going to be served dinner, but there's no fussing or complaining or whining about the food. That was the clear rule.
Yeah.
The second thing is you've got to have clear consequences. Mm-hmm. Clear consequences. Now, we had told him in advance that if he didn't like the food and he whined and fussed about it, then he would be removed from the table and wouldn't get to have dinner. It was just a crystal clear consequence.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then number 3, you've got to enforce it immediately.
Yeah.
So they know that this is a real rule. It's a real consequence. This is really going to happen instead of just threat after threat after threat that we see so often in families sometimes.
By far and away, the worst thing that you can do is just threaten and then threaten and then have rules that you never follow up on because the child gets used to having no boundaries and then they become spoiled and a little reckless. So remember that old expression that says, next to your love, your children need your rules.
Limits.
They need your limits. They need those regulations. And, I think about this inside of each of our own lives. We all need to know where the boundaries are. We need to know what the game rules are. We need to know what it says. Even people that are, adrenaline junkies and that are like jumping out of airplanes and pulling parachutes and jumping out, like they still need to know, okay, what are the boundaries? What can be done? What can't be done? And they want to know what the limitations are. When do I pull the cord if I'm jumping out of the airplane? Right. So these kinds of things are really important. And then, of course, immediate consequences. So I tell them about one of our non-negotiables.
Story.
Yeah, one of our non-negotiables is you don't talk back to Margie in any way, shape, or form. Not verbally, not emotionally, by rolling your eyes, not body language. And particularly, no disrespecting Margie in the sense of completely ignoring her. So a while back, our family loves Rubik's Cubes and mind game kind of stuff. Yeah, and puzzles and whatnot. So one of our children was sitting on the couch playing this Rubik's Cube and messing around with it. Margie walked in, said their name, gave them a specific assignment, and then started to walk away. And the child completely and totally ignored Margie. And so Margie, being nice, turned around and gave the request one more time. And I'm on the other side of the room watching this roll out. And and the child just continued to ignore Margie. Well, that's a violation of like rule number 1 in the house of respecting mother. And so without any warning, without any discussion about it, I walked over, grabbed the Rubik's Cube, smashed it, picked up the pieces, and threw it in the garbage. And I turned around to the rest of the children and said, okay, who else would like to disrespect and ignore mother? And then I turned to him and I said, your mother asked you to do something. You had better do it right now. Now, we later had a conversation and, I talked about it and I just said, look, I'm sorry the Rubik's Cube got destroyed, but the fact is you violated a known non-negotiable in the house and it's just not acceptable. You had to suffer the consequences. And so sometimes parents will be like, oh, that's really harsh. I can't believe you would do that or this, that, and the other. But you have to let them know that there are very specific predefined limits. And if you're always negotiating those and being soft and not implementing consequences that you said you were going to implement immediately, then the problem will just get worse and worse and worse and worse. And you'll never get anywhere in terms of helping your children grow to their full potential. Now,
and you sacrificing that $8 toy is so worth what you're getting out of it.
Right.
The long-term benefits of what you're teaching your child and the rest of the children that were standing there watching, right?
Exactly.
And so it's a long-term lesson that needs to be learned as soon as possible in a child's life so that it will have the benefit throughout their life.
Now, these long-term lessons are something that we call high leverage aspects. In other words, we don't have non-negotiables for everything that go on inside the house. We have non-negotiables for a handful of things that we consider high leverage. So for example, think about the consequence of not disrespecting mother. Now when she asks for things to get done, or she gives direction, they know that disrespecting her or not doing it or ignoring her is a non-negotiable, and so they immediately begin to act on it. Now, if you think through that, think about how many hours of contention and fighting and arguing we have avoided in our house because of that one tiny little rule. Think about the other example, the discussion about not fussing about the food, right?
Yeah.
How many mealtime arguments have we avoided by having one small non-negotiable rule that says we just eat what we're given?
That's right.
Yeah. So, having this high leverage environment where you think carefully about what's non-negotiable in your house, that is little tiny things that have huge long-term consequences, is really important. Now, there's one other thing that we do in terms of our activities for these non-negotiables, and we talk about the consequences and what's going to happen, and then we immediately apply them. But oftentimes there's also positive consequences. Like, we are very big. I just saw this morning as we were at breakfast. Margie's amazing at giving a lot of praise and a lot of love when the non-negotiables are honored. And so Margie called everyone into breakfast. Everyone came in and sat down. And Margie was like, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you responded immediately. And so there's this ongoing positive feedback loop happening inside the environment based on these non-negotiables. Now, little surprise, the sort of surprise ending here is this high leverage point. I want to tell you just a quick story about the New York subways.
This is a great one.
The New York subways. So a number of years ago, there were major problems in New York City. The huge crime rate, all kinds of issues. They kept trying to increase police force and have more and more cops and more enforcement and brutality go on inside of that environment. And they found that they just could not curb all the problems. So they brought in an expert, and he looked and he realized that a lot of the problems were starting in the subway system. And so people weren't paying to get in. There was a lot of graffiti. There were crimes going on. There were drug deals going on. And so he said, look, instead of trying to focus on all the issues happening inside of New York, let's just clean up the subways. Let's just make sure there's never graffiti. They're all clean. Everybody pays their token or their toll getting in, and there's no drug deals. Let's just focus on one little area, and that's the subways. In other words, they decided to focus on the small things. They're focusing on the small things. And the result is that New York radically transformed in terms of its crime rate because they focused on one little thing, and it was not breeding and infesting and causing long-term problems. And we see that inside of our family, don't we?
In our family, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, we see that when we focus on the little things, it creates really big results. And sadly, most parents wait until the issues start and they become big issues, and then they've got to manage the big issues.
The big problem. And
Right.
It's so hard to manage that big one. Whereas if you had started way back, the seeds that germinated the problem, then you're never going to have the big problems.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah.
So our encouragement to you today, our challenge, is to sit down and to think carefully about non-negotiables. So what is something that you can create a clearly defined rule on, a clearly defined consequence on, and that you are willing to enforce immediately, both on the positive and on the negative sides, for both the good and the bad, with praise and with other kinds of negative effects if they violate the non-negotiable, and then decide how you're going to implement this and think in terms of high leverage. What are a few little things that you can do to create really big results? Would love to hear about it. Jump on the Facebook page and tell us all about it. And of course, as always, if you stick around for a few minutes, we'll give you details on a free gift that we've got for you that'll really help you take this principle and move it up to the next level to get a lot more joy and peace out of your family. Thanks for listening today.
Thank you.
Bye. Hello, friends. Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Now, would you do us two favors?
The first one is subscribe to this channel. That way you can get all the great updates we're going to be sending your way.
The second thing is, do you want more joy in your family life? Do you want more peace and happiness? Well, if you do, we want to give you our entire parenting system, the Family Fun Miracle, totally for free.
You ever felt friction in your home or stress in your marriage?
I know.
Do you ever wish your kids would do more? Or do you ever feel overwhelmed? If so, then how are you going to change it?
Yeah. What are you going to do different?
That's right. Now, in our family, with 11 children and Joshua and I both, pretty strong-willed.
Very strong-willed.
There's a lot of opportunity for stress.
Now, you know that if things are going to change in your family life, you've got to start thinking different. You've got to feel different. You need to see your children and your spouse in a totally new light.
Now, to help you with this, we've created a free guide for you called the Family Fun Miracle. And you can access that right now. Go to endlessfamilyjoy.com/fun.
Again, that's endlessfamilyjoy.com/fun. We'll give you the entire system, a complete guidebook, and a training video that'll show you real life examples of how you can implement in your home, totally free of charge.
So just go to the website, give us your name and email address. We'll instantly send you everything you need.
This is the exact same system, the same principles that Margie and I use with our very large and challenging family to reduce stress, remove friction, and have more peace and more joy inside of our family life.
Thanks for coming here today. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. But until then, show real love to your family, cherish your family, and create more joy.